What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out Podcast, brought to you by my friends at Zone Pouches. Here's what we're going to do right now. Little Middlekauff Mailbag. DMs wide open. It's my Instagram. DMs wide open. Slide in those DMs. Get your questions answered on this show at John Middlekauff. At John Middlekauff is my Instagram. DMs wide open. Fire in. We'll start with Derek. Is Brandon Aiyuk done for the season? Kyle originally said they were targeting week 6 for his return, but it's now week 10, and he says they aren't opening up his practice window until he can hit specific, quote, GPS speed metrics. With an injury like his, what happens if he's never able to hit those metrics again? I don't expect to see him this year. I would say that this season is a wash. And I think that situation is just a sad situation, right? Obviously, they paid him. He came back. He just looked out of sorts. And then he had a devastating injury. You know, it wasn't just your typical torn ACL. There were ligaments. It was really bad. I mean, there is a chance that he is never the same. And that is the defense of why you hold out to try to get as much money as possible, right? From his side, he did exactly what you should do to protect yourself if a situation like this happens. He was a dominant route-running wide receiver. Dominant might be strong, but a high-end route-running player. Right? Cuts, explosion in and out of breaks. Just was awesome at getting open. And then his knee snapped. And now they gave him a lot of money. And, I think there's a decent chance that he is never effective again, which is one of the big risks of this sport, is that you can have a catastrophic injury. And regardless, like, modern medicine's never been better than it is now. Right? Like, when I was a kid, Achilles injuries would end careers. Now it's like, especially with a young player, they can bounce back. ACL injuries, you might as well like have a nosebleed. They're nothing. But when you have ligaments, and it was really bad. So I have no expectation to see Brandon Aiyuk this season. Or Purdy, really. I mean, so really they gave a lot of money to Purdy and Aiyuk, and both of them had just awful injuries. Now, Purdy's injury not going to derail his career, but it cost him 2025, it looks like. How do you think other head coaches view Cignetti? Do you think they respect him, or is there a bit of an envy, hostility toward him since he's shown the program can be flipped overnight? If I'm a new or current head coach at program X, Y, or Z, is there less of a runway before my seat starts to heat up? I definitely think he's changed the game a little bit, and I think he's added pressure of like, he's flipped it immediately. I mean, he's going to make the playoffs back-to-back years. He's going to have 2 straight years making the playoffs at Indiana. So when you're Auburn, you're like, we're not even remotely close. When you're Florida, you're like, what is going on? When you're Penn State and you're losing to UCLA, you're like, how is this happening? So I think he is a direct reflection of people being pissed off around the country at their coach. Want a guy who I think is going to heat up on is Mario Cristobal, because they're paying him a lot of money. He should have had his pick of the litter at quarterback, and he picked Carson Beck, and Carson Beck's cost them 2 games. Just horrendous interceptions. So, and anyone could have, a couple years ago when they had Cam Ward, their defense wasn't any good. I guess that was last year. But this year, when they signed Carson Beck, everyone was like, hey, man, we just watched Carson. Seems a little risky. Especially like, how much you giving him? Like $5 million? Okay. You sure there's not another guy out there? And now they're going to miss the playoffs. And to me, it's crazy. The crazy part about college football, and I was thinking this when the top 12 came out, is my cousin who played at Fresno State in like 2003, 4, 5, 6 range. And then I went to work when he finished, a couple years after he finished playing. When I was at Fresno State, we were in the WAC. And the WAC had Boise State, It had New Mexico. It had New Mexico, or it didn't have New Mexico. It had New Mexico State. Had Hawaii. Um, who else did we play? Utah State. But before, like a couple years before, it had schools like Utah and BYU and San Diego State. They were in the WAC. And then they all merged and created the Mountain West, which for a long time had New Mexico, San Diego State, Utah, BYU, schools like that. And I'm looking now, Utah and BYU are better programs and ranked higher than Miami, are especially Utah. You know, BYU in the early 80s like won a national championship. But Utah, like Utah is just better than Florida State and is better than, like, who would you take on a neutral site? Winner gets into the playoffs, Miami or Utah. Who would you trust more? Because I know my answer, Kyle Whittingham in Utah. So it shows you the power in the NFL. The Jets are a disaster because they have no quarterback. They've hit on all these picks, you know, a ton of picks. No quarterback, none of it matters. Even if you have a decent coach, right? And who knows? I mean, Saul or Aaron Glenn, good head coaches, I don't know. But even if I gave them Andy Reid, like he could only do so much with Justin Fields. They would clearly be better than they are now. But like at the end of the day, if your quarterback's bad, your quarterback's bad. So I think when you look, the quarterback in college football is kind of the coach. And then obviously that coach needs to, then the second most important guy is the quarterback. But you can win in college football with average quarterbacks. Will Howard, Riley Leonard, they were drafted in like the 6th, 7th round. You do not need Joe Burrow to win the national championship. It helps. But like you can win the national championship if your coach knows what he's doing and building up the program, or compete for one with a 3rd rounder. The coach is the most important guy. So when you get the coach wrong, it is just, you got no shot. One thing I'm going to hit on, I think, on Fugazi Friday is one story that kind of went viral was Hugh Freeze and Brian Kelly playing a lot of golf. Have some thoughts there when it comes to a college coach. Just crazy. The landscape of college is just a lot different. Like if I can just win at Utah, go to the playoffs, or I can win at Indiana to go to the playoffs. Like is Penn State, like I think we talk about that job like it's 1987 or 1998. It's a good job, but what the hell is the difference nowadays? Do I have an infrastructure? Can I pay the coach? Can I pay coordinators? Because do I have NIL? I can win anywhere. It's like the world is flat. You know, before, think about this. I'm living in Scottsdale, Arizona. 30 years ago, I would not have been here, right? I wouldn't have had the optionality because of my profession, just like so many human beings who can operate from wherever. Technology changed the game. I would probably still be in Northern California. Well, now Scottsdale is much more desirable. Austin, Texas is much more desirable. Florida is much more desirable. Nashville is much more desirable because human beings are much more, it's easier to transport your life and still operate and work regardless where you live, because the world truly is flat now with technology. That wasn't the case 20, 30 years ago. So where you were based, you know, if you wanted to work in finance, you kind of had to be in New York or San Francisco. If you wanted to work in Hollywood, you know, or you wanted to be in the movies, you kind of had to go to Southern California. And times have dramatically changed, and they will only continue to change, right? So I think it's no different than college football as it is in society. As times change, and things that used to be norms no longer are. You know, it wasn't just cool to live in Nashville or Austin, Texas, or Scottsdale, Arizona in 1996. People weren't just lined up to move there. 30 years later, things have changed. No different in college football. Like, some things are still the same, but like, you know, I mean, Penn State would have been a no-brainer. Everyone would have been lined up for that job. Now the guy at Indiana is like, I'll stay at Indiana. I got a question. Would you trade Kyler straight up for Tua? Seems like they both need a fresh start. I don't know exactly. I haven't dove deep enough. I'm sure once we get toward free agency, you know, the combine, depending on who's coaching those teams, if I could just do a straight up trade for both guys instead of cutting them and, you know, impacting my cap, I might think about doing that for a year, especially because you could cut both guys after 2026. I would entertain that, depending on what my options were. Today's show is brought to you by our new presenting sponsor, Hard Rock Bet. We talk a lot of football and 3 and out, but there's always something to bet on. The NBA's in full swing. College hoops literally started Monday, and even the NHL is heating up. So if you haven't tried your first bet yet, just download the Hard Rock Bet app, and there's still time for you to get 150 in bonus bets. Just place a $5 bet, and if it hits, you not only get your winnings, but 150 in extra bonus bets. The Hard Rock Bet Sportsbook app is the only legal sportsbook whenever you're in Florida. And it also is live in Arizona, Ohio, Jersey, Indiana, Tennessee, Virginia, Illinois, Colorado, coming soon in more states near you. So whenever you're listening, just open the app and check out what you've got on any given day of the week. Download the Hard Rock Bet app today and make your first deposit. Debate between friends. What makes for a better sports viewing experience, drinking or gummies? Personally, I've been a big supporter of watching sports off edibles since there is no hangover involved and I can actually remember key moments of games. But my friends prefer the old school way of getting shit-faced and watching the game. What is better? Well, I think it depends. If you're by yourself, no brainer, gummies, right? Because it can feel like, especially if you got a phone in your hand, game on, it's a good experience. I would say if you have other people around, I'm not a big gummy with other people guy. One, I'm not a huge gummy guy. I have to be careful. Sometimes you eat a little too much, and I'm in cloud nine. And I'm not. I'm more of a CBD guy than a THC, but you get the right THC, like pretty good. I would rather have some cocktails or have a couple beers watching the game with a group of people. If I'm going to be by myself at my house watching Alabama LSU, yeah, I'd rather have a gummy. So I think it's very dependent on the situation. Would I want to? Would I want to like go to a buddy's house or meet someone at a bar or something on a gummy? I would not. Now, I don't do them consistently enough to know, like, sometimes, your boy can be like, okay, stop these negative thoughts. You got to control that brain. When you can control the brain, everything's good. But if you can't, you go down a rabbit hole. All of a sudden, you find yourself on your buddy's couch thinking about some of the darkest moments of your life. You're like, I cannot stop this. So I would rather have, a vodka soda in that situation. Good question, though. Two questions. Lions fan. Is it because the Lions are just starting to be a good team after years of being so bad that every single loss fans make it seem like the season is over? Also, would you consider drafting a quarterback in the next year or two to sit behind Jared Goff? I think that's the nature of football. When you're a good team, right? Let's just say the line is 12 wins or more. So if you're winning 12 or more games, you are more than doubling the amount of wins than you have losses. Well, you only have 17 games, so when you lose 4 or 5, those moments feel really big. And it's either twofold. It's one, you're losing a game that you should win, like when the Packers lose to the Browns or the Panthers. There probably aren't many of their fans that anticipate anything else than a win going into that game. So it is jarring when you lose. Like you couldn't. I know the Bulls are 5-1, but like the Warriors right now are 5-3. Like, it doesn't matter if they were 8-0 or if they were 3-5. It's like if they're going to be healthy, they're going to be okay, right? So to me in basketball, I think one. I think in basketball it's like every 8 games is essentially one NFL game. So the Warriors, for example, at 5-3 have played one NFL game. Think how crazy that is. So, and I could be wrong on that math. I have to double check. Maybe that's baseball because now it's like 8 games. 8 times 10 would be 80. Maybe it's more like 4. Maybe it's baseball if it's 8 or 9. Don't quote me on that in a bar argument. But yeah, I don't think that makes any sense. 4. It'd probably be like 6. Probably be like 6. But I just think that's the nature of the sport. But it's why the sport's so big. Every game matters. It's football's greatest attribute is watching that game matters. It's why I struggle like trying to get into some series on television. I've said this forever. I'm not a like science fiction things that are unrealistic television guy. But when something like Game of Thrones is such a big show, I'm just gonna watch it. And I can find enough stuff in that show, sex, violence, that kind of keeps my interest. Like ultimately the Dragons and stuff, like that's not doing that much for me. But I know culturally a lot of people are watching it, and I like to watch. I get a little FOMO on television stuff, right? Where it's easy to watch, I don't know, White Lotus or a show that is more enjoyable for myself, especially back in the day. Sopranos, you name it, some of the big shows over the last 25 years. But it's kind of rare that that happens anymore, right? It's a really, really short list of a show that like most people are watching this thing. And I think that's what football has. Everyone's watching. Do you know what basketball? And sometimes I'll be at the gym and they have three TVs. And it's usually one's on Fox Sports, one's on ESPN, and one's on ESPN2. So if I'm on the elliptical, I'm actually not an elliptical guy. I'm either a treadmill or a Stairmaster guy. And you just, it kind of, especially if you're on the Stairmaster, your eye line is just with the television. So even if you're watching the television on the Stairmaster, which it has, you're going to look up, take some deep breaths. Sometimes you're just going to look at it. Sometimes when I see Stephen A, in before Christmas, arguing over a basketball topic of like, do we need to have concern? It's like 4 games into the season or 10 games. It's like, what are we talking about? But you got to manipulate that for television. In football, you do not, right? That Packer loss was bad. Like that was a problem, right? That Colts game, you all of a sudden you lose. Like, is this the Daniel Jones we know? They're real conversations, right? They're real conversations, which really benefits the popularity of the sport. Been a listener since the 95.7 days. It's a radio station. Do you think there's been a little bit of a pendulum swing between the NFC and AFC? Lamar hurt, Burrow hurt, Bills and Chiefs don't seem as invincible. Meanwhile, the Rams, Bucks, Eagles seems like powerhouses. Lions, Packers even thrown. Seattle in there with Darnold. I definitely think the NFC is on the come. Also, would like to get your thoughts on Vrabel, Drake May, and the Pats. They are right in the running for the top spot in the AFC, and seems like nobody is talking about. I just don't think people think they're quite as good, as the Bills or the Chiefs, or I mean specifically the Bills. Like, because I actually looked today. The Patriots are like plus 140 to win the division. The Bills, I think, to start the season were like minus 400, which is an enormous favorite to win a division. And the Patriots, if you probably have to plus 350 or something. They're definitely still have an uphill battle, but it's not as unrealistic if the Bills screw up and lose one of these games. So I think the Patriots, their team is going to be much more talented in a couple years. It just will be. But their schedule is pretty conducive this year. And that game in New England, I have to pull it up. When do they play? When do they play the New England Patriots? They play the Bills 12-14. That's a good game. And leading up to that game, they have the Buccaneers this week. It's not a bad game. Then they get the Jets, who traded away their entire team, on Thursday Night Football at home. That's a win. At the Bengals versus the Giants. So even if they lose this Buccaneers game, it would be stunning if they went 2-2. I would say at 7-2, there's a pretty good chance they're 10-3 going into that Bills game. And the Bills, leading into that game, get the Dolphins this week. I like the Dolphins. Then they get the Bucks at home. Then they get at the Steelers versus the Bengals, and then at the Patriots. They actually have 5 games because I think the Patriots have a bye. So they go at Dolphins, Buccaneers, at the Texans, at the Steelers. That's a tough little stretch. Buccaneers, at Texans, at Steelers. Probably lose one of those games. That Bills game is going to be big. That Bills Patriot game is going to be really, really big. If you're as competitive as I am, you're always looking for something to help you stay dialed in. And for me, that thing is Zone nicotine pouches. You won't catch me without one. A can. I'm actually out. I need to go tomorrow to the Chevron right down my right down the street. And my go-to is usually dragon fruit or citrus, especially when I'm playing golf. Not to mention 20 pouches per can versus 15 that the other guys offer. So choose Zone and dominate the day. Use the promo code 3and out20 on NicoKick.com for 20% off at checkout. This product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. Underage sale prohibitive. We always comment on this organization if terrible from the top down, but a bunch of these crappy teams have underwent full regime changes, like all new coaching staffs and new front office people. So when an organization like Vegas or Jets, they clear house, how do we keep saying they don't know what they're doing? When from an outsider viewer, or at least for me, it's all people who have nothing to do with the previous people running the team. It's a hell of a question. It's hard to shake dysfunction, man. You can feel it when you come into the building. The other thing in a lot of those places, the carryover players don't know how to win. Right? If Andy Reid disappeared tomorrow and Spags or Nagy had to keep it running the rest of the season and next season, they wouldn't be as good, more than likely, right? But they wouldn't be bad. Why? Because the culture of their guys, starting with their star players, but then all the other starters, think how much winning Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey have done. Think about the standard in which they understand what it takes to win. Or Trent McDuffie or George Karlaftis, right? Nick Bolton. Like those guys, the understanding they have of even now some of their wide receivers who have played with them for a couple of years. And I think that's hard. Like at the end of the day, Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Quinnen Williams, Colton Miller, Max Crosby. I think those guys are winning players, but like they've never won. And definitely the people around them, that there's not a winning culture. I think that's very, very difficult to change overnight. And that's where the pressure on the head coach and the GM is enormous, but specifically the head coach. And like Pete Carroll, he's had an impressive resume. He's 74 years old. I mean, there is a chance. I like the hire, but there's a chance he just lost his fastball. Right? Mike Vrabel has not lost fastball. Like you put Mike Vrabel as the Jets head coach or the Raiders head coach. I don't think they're a playoff team, but they're both way better. They're both dramatically better. The other thing is both those two teams, for example, made a bad personnel move. I mean, the Jets signed Justin Fields for 2 years, $40 million. The Raiders traded for Geno Smith. Why? Because Pete Carroll likes him. Not a good move. Jets call the Bengals in the offseason and offer 5 first-rounders and 2 seconds for Burrow. What happens? I'm a lifetime Bengal fan, and Burrow being my favorite player, I say no. If you're Duke Tobin, what would you say? It's a great question. I think if you're the Jets, obviously you would do that, but it would be pretty risky. I mean, this is a guy now who's had some major injuries. He hasn't been able to finish 3 seasons. One with a wrist, one with a knee, and now one with turf toe. So it's like durability is a major concern. But I also think you're a little less likely to do that now that you just traded Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. But obviously those guys bring the picks. I think if you're the Bengals, you would think about it. I think you would think long and hard about it. Obviously, you would never contemplate it if he had been healthy and you'd been winning, but like he's missed a lot of games for you. So I wouldn't fault him if they did that. Wouldn't fault him at all. Don't think that's going to happen, though. Question for the pod. Will we ever see a quarterback shorter than 6 feet drafted first overall again, or in the first round for that matter? I thought we got a little overzealous with that one. But you look around the country, it also takes the guys in college to be really good. So when you go first overall, like Kyler Murray was drafted top 10 in baseball. He's an all-time freak, right? Baker Mayfield's right around 6 feet, like won the Heisman, was an elite player. Bryce, pretty unique situation, 5'10", a buck 75. I think if you do that over again, obviously you take C.J. Stroud. But I think when you look around college football, like who is that guy now? I think the Ole Miss guy is shorter, but I don't think you would draft him number 1 overall. I would never draft a guy 5'10", number 1 overall. Couldn't do it. I'm a big believer in just big people. We were actually talking about this after we recorded one of the shows the other night. Like Jalen Waddle's a really good player. But in what world if we were all running a football team? It's like, hey, you want to take Jalen Waddle, who's 5'9", a buck 80, good player, or Penei Sewell? Like, you wonder why the Dolphins are bad. They took Jalen Waddle at 6, while they already had Tyreek Hill, who they had just traded for, over Panay Sewell. Like, bad franchises stay bad for a reason. In what world organizationally would someone in the room go, I don't think this is a good idea? Like, how about we take that big ass dude from Oregon who is probably at worst going to be a 10-year starter and at best is going to be a Hall of Famer? What? I think we should do that. But we can get a 5'9" wide receiver. Yeah, there's like 17 of those guys in the draft. Let's take that guy in the third round. Well, he's not as good as Waddle. Well, he'll be 60, 70% of them for a quarter of the price. And we'll have one of the best tackles in the game. Why don't we do that? Oh, yeah, he's a right tackle. Our quarterback's, a left-handed player. So he's actually protecting his blind side. You want to do that? Is that a good idea? My entire life, NFL coaches and players get together at halftime to make adjustments, but both Peyton and Eli have laughed at this idea. They claim they have never made a single halftime adjustment in their careers. What do you make of this? Do teams make adjustments at halftime? It's a good question. I think I think their argument is we make adjustments every time we come to the sideline. So going in at half, we have made adjustments and we're constantly tweaking things every time we come off the field. What we see, what's working, what's not working, what we could do, what we should add. So I think their point is it gets talked about often. Like you play the first half and then you go to halftime and then you completely rework everything and come back out for the second half. Where I think part of it for a quarterback is every single time you come on and off the field, you're tweaking stuff. So you're going out at halftime, you've already talked about a bunch of stuff that's happened. Maybe happens more for defensive guys, but I think offensive guys could be wrong on that. Never been with Peyton or Eli at halftime, but I would imagine that's part of it. This is a non-football related question, but I've been watching you for a long time and respect your opinions, information you give. You've been working in sports for a long time. I'm at a university. I'm majoring in sports management and minoring in nutrition. I've always loved sports, health, and fitness, so it's a perfect path for me. I'm just unsure what job market with these degrees since I'm only getting a minor in nutrition. I won't be a registered nutritionist or dietitian. Have you worked with people who have taken a similar path and were able to work on health and fitness side of sports, and what degrees did they have? I think your sports management one, it sounds like you want to focus more on the nutrition side. Sports management is broad. You could do anything. You could one day be a president of a team. You could ticket sales. You could marketing. It's pretty open ended. When I was a GA at Fresno State, my master's was I think it was in the business department, but it was like they had just created a sports management. Maybe it was in the nutrition department. I don't even remember, but it was a pretty general degree. Not that it's had any impact on me going to football or radio or anything, but it does. It gives you a lot of options. I can't speak to the nutrition aspect of whether it be a team dietitian or uh, I don't know. I'm actually the wrong guy to ask on this. I could help you with any trying to get the path or some sort of path on getting an internship and ticket sales. I always think sales is the easiest way to kind of work your way in any organization, but definitely a sports team is the easiest way to get your foot in the door, and then you can take it from there. But when it comes to nutrition, I don't know. I hate to not have an answer for you, but I don't really have an answer on that one. Why don't other GMs just try doing what Howie does? Easier said than done, but always drafts players from schools like Georgia, trades aging players, and acquires areas of need before the deadline. Make it sound pretty easy. They have clearly made a conscious effort. Oh, I mean, I know this for a fact of just drafting the big school guys, and they've drafted a ton of guys from Bama and Georgia. I think the trade thing is twofold. One, his owner is a big proponent of being aggressive and making these moves. So it's why they called Dallas on Micah Parsons. They would have given Micah Parsons $170 million. So part of trading the picks, it wasn't just, it's like, are you willing to give him a huge sum of money? And Jeffrey Lurie was. A lot of owners would be like, let's just find our own guy. Use our first round picks. Let's find our own Micah Parsons. So the owner is willing to spend, which empowers Howie to be aggressive. But yeah, I mean, I think one trade he has that's really good, beside like Kelsey and Brandon Graham and probably Lane Johnson, he's not going to be beholden emotionally to a player. And I think sometimes GMs, especially once you've become an established star player, big name, kind of get too emotionally attached. But coaches definitely do. And in most organizations, coaches have a lot of juice, right? A lot of them, the coaches pick the personnel guys. And in Philadelphia, they just do not. Howie does. So, uh, yeah, if you can get the reign and the power as a GM and don't have to answer to the coaches, you can do exactly what Howie's doing.